Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Welcome, everybody. Okay, let's see here. First of all, I want to thank Jesse James and Outcast for having me back on their show. I will be back on the Dangerous Info podcast on Monday night. Talk about a variety of things, I'm sure, some education things per usual, and of course, it's back to school time and the insanity has already ensued. So tune into that at 7 p.m. on Monday evening over on Rumble, Dangerous Info Podcast. If you are interested, always a good hang. Love those guys to death. Great time. Okay, let's get into this here. I know that in the last episode, I was riled up about the flock camera stuff. And I, of course, am riled up about it for what I think are the right reasons. Certainly given the fact and the open admissions that the city council in the town where I live has again openly stated as to why they want them gone. They want them gone because they want to cover for illegal aliens. They want crime to occur in their town. They're 100% fine harboring illegal aliens, harboring God knows who else. Again, their police department has misused the flock camera system before. They would do it again. I have no doubt about that. They, of course, aren't going to admit it, and the city council isn't going to even approach the subject with them. They just blindly say, well, we trust them. We trust the Oxford Police Department. The problem with all of this, again, and I put the Substack together for a reason, was solely for the purpose of reminding people how hypocritical and openly hypocritical these people are. I ran down a list of at least 11, 12 plus points showing these individuals again that civil liberties are not something that they actually care about because they abandoned them completely in 2020. But I came across this particular article, and I just again wanted to mention this very quickly here off the top, but this was from 100% Fed Up, and it says, grand jury refuses to indict Ohio man who damaged flock camera. This is absolutely hilarious. It says a Claremont County man who faced felony vandalism charges for allegedly destroying a flock camera in Union Township has had his case dismissed. Cody Morlock was accused of damaging the camera system located on Mount Carmel, Tabasco Road near Glen Ross Lane on June 13th. According to Union Township Police, investigators claimed that he removed the bolts holding the equipment in place, causing the camera, solar panel, and support pole to fall before he destroyed them. Police said that the footage from a nearby camera helped identify him as the suspect. Flock camera was leased by the Union Township Police Department, and authorities estimated the damage at more than $1,000. A Claremont County grand jury ultimately declined to indict Morlock on the felony charges. Ohio is anti-flock. Again, it's very funny, but as I said, and it's true, that Cleveland, Columbus, Dayton, all these areas, again, urban areas, they're sanctuary cities. They want the flock cameras gone. I'm not saying that that was this guy's motive for taking down the flock camera. I really don't know. Maybe he was just having a good time. But either way, it's the sanctuary cities that want them gone because they don't want ICE tapping into them and catching illegal aliens, which means all of these places are 100% fine with crime. That's the alarming part. You would think that they would even hide that. I mean, I understand they have a sanctuary city policy here in Oxford, Ohio. I fully understand that. I mean, that's on the record. They fall for the latest NPC left-wing flavor of the month, no matter what it is. But they're rather brazen when they openly come out and say, well, we want to harbor illegal aliens. That's why we want the flock cameras gone. I mean, again, you'd think you'd keep that on the down low and you keep that a little quiet, but they're not doing that. And they're not the only ones. Again, a lot of these places are getting rid of them for just that reason, which is terrible. Because they should be getting rid of them for all of the right reasons. This goes way beyond constitutional violations. It ties in directly the wireless body area network. And that should go without saying at this point for those of you who are well versed in that. Sabrina Wallace has talked about this very specifically. Even Palantir has openly discussed this, and I have videos on my social media that openly discuss this. They use these cameras and these surveillance systems to find individuals. Again, whether they are suspected of a crime or not suspected of a crime, just to figure out, again, how a person travels. They put all this information together. They map out exactly how frequently they travel, and these computer systems are doing this with a level of ease, so much so that the people behind them and the police officers specifically actually don't have to do much work. Again, it's Minority Report all over again. Getting to a point eventually where pre-crime actually exists and individuals are stopped without even, again, a crime having been occurred. But more importantly than that, and this is where it gets very dangerous, not to mention you have all these news stories, of course, of all of these directed energy weapons taking place and how, again, they can fry an individual from a distance, the Havana syndrome stuff, but it's way worse than that because every single human being is an electrical current, which means if you can use these surveillance systems to target and locate a person, which they already do, and they use it at the military level to take out particular individuals and automobiles and homes and you name it, why on earth wouldn't local police departments within the United States eventually get to that point, in particular if they're coerced to do so? They would. It's just another perfect example of the Hegelian dialect. Same exact thing over again. We'll manufacture a problem, we'll create the solution to said problem, but we'll sell it to individuals as being the solution when in fact it will be to their detriment. Yes, good things will come from it, but that's how you sell it to people. That's exactly why police departments sign off on it. That's exactly why police chiefs are like, oh, well, we need these tools because they're remarkably important. The police chiefs who don't want these surveillance systems exist in two separate camps. The ones who are harboring illegal aliens and 100% fine with a certain level of crime because they're being coerced and paid off to accept that level of crime. Or you have police chiefs who are very knowledgeable about the Constitution and the larger scheme behind all of this. And people, again, would be remarkably dismissive to openly say, well, it's a conspiracy theory, take off your tinfoil hat, blah, 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 and start name-calling. That's not it. There is a larger scheme here, again, that wasn't ever brought up in the Oxford City Council meeting in the town where I live when it came to flock cameras. They didn't even approach the subject, really, on the long-term ramifications of such a surveillance system. Even President Trump is being asked about this now. And he's basically saying, well, I'm going to have to wait a couple of weeks. I'm going to have to keep studying it, and then I'll sort of give everybody what my opinion is on the whole thing. Again, the pros and the cons can all be weighed, but the long-term con is exactly why they were really implemented. That was the point. That's why it's been normalized. There's always going to be an ebb and flow, a give and a take, but the take is always going to be way worse than the give. We'll give you some security, of course. If an individual robs you, then we'll be able to catch them and find them and track them down and the whole thing. Again, a couple of years ago, I think it was a couple of years ago, a black guy in a neighboring town came down my road where I live and broke into every single automobile or attempted to break into every single automobile that was not parked in their garage with the garage door down. He had all kinds of stuff in his possession. He tried to break into my car, but he broke the lock, but he couldn't open the door. Didn't bother breaking the glass, but he tried to rip open the lock, and yeah, it didn't work. Point is, they ended up catching the guy. They ended up getting back most of the things that were stolen. And as it turns out, they ended up using, again, the flock system, along with the other surveillance systems, to find this individual. They accessed Ring doorbell camera footage from different homes. Again, they saw the car traveling from Oxford all the way to Fairfield. Police, again, were contacted. They used all the systems necessary to find the guy. They found the guy, and that was it. Now he's in jail. But again, they didn't need the flock system to catch the guy. Everybody's home is a flock system if you have a Ring doorbell. If you have security cameras like I do, same thing. Again, there's other cameras that are used all the time. I'm not saying that the cameras at intersections are very good either, but again, they do certainly catch individuals. Like the guy, again, that I just mentioned in the story where he tore down the flock camera and then he ended up getting caught. It wasn't the flock cameras that caught him doing it. It was the other surveillance cameras that the department and the town had in place outside of flock that ended up catching the guy. Again, he got off, which was, I think, funny, but either way, they have other systems. They have other ways of doing these things. Everybody has a cell phone. Cell phones have cameras on them. People are always sticking their phones in other people's faces and recording crimes and recording all kinds of things that they think are crimes. And then they show police, and then that's it. But again, we don't need more of this kind of thing. We need less. We existed just fine with less. And if people are vigilant, which I would go so far as to say more people today, I think, are a little more vigilant than they used to be. At least I like to think so. Maybe not, but not everybody, certainly. But again, if people just blindly accept all of this stuff without ever thinking or considering what the long-term ramification or the long-term scheme behind the company's implementation of such a device really is, if they don't think that far beyond, again, their hand in front of their face, then they're never going to figure it out, and they'll just accept anything and everything all of the time. Again, this became problematic only for the town where I live because they recognized that other police departments had access to their cameras, and specifically ICE agents. And being anti-ICE, if you're a leftist communist, which is redundant, but if you're a communist and you're anti-ICE, this right now, getting rid of flock cameras, is the flavor of the month. They once accepted this a long time ago, and now again, they're getting rid of it for all the wrong reasons. So keep an eye on it. Again, it's going to continue to be an interesting debate. Some towns are going to double down on their flock cameras, and some towns, of course, are just going to get rid of it altogether. But the question is why are they doubling down on getting them? And then why are they doubling down on getting rid of them? That's the real question, I think. Okay, moving on here. Just a quick little note. One last geopolitical thing here before I get into education, because I got a bunch of education stuff here. The DSA. I've been watching these goofballs for a while. I find the Democratic Socialists of America, this particular organization, to be artificial. It could very well be a complete psy-op, to be honest. The timing of them being around is rather interesting because it gives conservatives a punching bag, certainly again during an election year, in a midterm election. And then one, I think, has to ask themselves the question, how is it that these individuals can make their way to Fox News? Because these are not the sharpest knives in the drawer, which then begs the question, okay, who's funding them? And frankly, I'm at a loss as to who might be funding them. This could be funded, again, through psychological operations through the United States military for the purpose of bolstering them up, to basically embarrass them and cause individuals to go more right-wing and stay further away from the left. We know it's having an impact on the left already because the left is dissatisfied and frankly repulsed by the DSA to a great extent. The other thing, unfortunately, that it's doing is it's driving leftists also in the opposite direction. It's taking them further left, away from maybe a centrist position on particular issues, and it's just dragging them further and further left to the point, again, where they're completely incoherent. So, I like I said, I'm almost at a loss as to who specifically is funding them. I also know that I wouldn't put it past Zionists and the Jewish lobby to fund them either, because what it does is it's taking away attention from them and it's putting it on Islam and Muslims, who again I don't support, not in the slightest. But it's making them the pincushion as opposed to Zionism, which is a problem. Because theoretically, and many people have heard this take, is that the Muslim construct and that entire religion is a creation of Zionism. That it's designed, again, specifically to attack Christians, while Zionists sort of just sit in the back and rub their hands together and laugh that another group is going after Christians or white Christians specifically. So it could be, again, that the Jewish lobby is funding these individuals to a great extent, giving them a platform, letting them do what they're doing because, again, it's a distraction. It's a distraction from the fact that Zionism is really what controls our country to a great extent. Our legislators, banks, funding, you name it, all of it. The education system, which I'll get into here in just a minute. But again, all of these moves that are being made are really being done by Zionists. And why wouldn't a Zionist want a Muslim takeover of some kind, certainly from a political standpoint, but also a property ownership standpoint and an ideological standpoint. They would want that because they don't care who destroys white Christians, just as long as white Christians are destroyed. So again, when you see these individuals on television and you see them making the rounds, and you have both political parties basically, again, making fun of them, attacking them, or again, doing their best to not even recognize them as existing. It's not that they don't exist, and it isn't that there aren't people, again, who share or espouse those particular ideologies that are remarkably radical. Again, getting rid of the Constitution and a million other things, getting rid of jails, the list goes on. I think that a person just has to ask themselves, how is it that they get primetime visibility for such a ridiculous ideology? Again, I don't think the timing is accidental. It could very well be, again, a military psychological operation to take these individuals, take the left as far left as humanly possible, to even disgust some of the older individuals who are on the left, to basically say, hey, look, I'm not interested in this. I'm more centrist, or now I'm going to vote for a Republican candidate as opposed to even a Muslim candidate or any of these DSA people because they're absolute lunatics. Again, I'm not saying they don't exist. They certainly do. But their fast organization and their fast, I would say, slingshot here into the limelight, I don't think is accidental. They've received help. They've received funding. And it could very well be that this is part of the shadow war, is that you have these two individuals, again, military psychological operation combined with, or I should say fighting against, a Zionist psychological operation in the interest, again, of swaying an election one way or another, or again, distracting individuals from the real problem in our country, which is Zionism, because they're the ones that fund the rise of these mosques. They're the ones that fund the takeover of the land. Again, they're the ones that distract with all of the Muslim narratives because they don't want people saying Jewish or Zionism. So they've played this game for a very long time. I'm not saying that they don't know what they're doing. They certainly do. But if that's the angle, then I think people need to keep an eye on that one too. Again, either way, regardless of who's funding it or any war that's taking place back and forth to drive that particular narrative, I think it's having its intended impact. People aren't talking about Zionism, even though they should be, because all the focus right now is on Muslims. And at the exact same time, Democrats don't want to associate because they seem too far left for them. But who knows? You give a person an opportunity, they'll show you exactly who they are, and if enough people around them become more radicalized, then those individuals will show you how radical they can become too. And it's pretty messed up, but it does happen all the time. So we'll have to keep an eye on that too. But again, I find these kids to be funny. A lot of them are younger. They don't know what they're doing. They're not well read. They don't speak English fluently in many cases. And they're getting primetime, again, they're getting primetime coverage and primetime interviews. And they're being embarrassed. But that's part of it, I think. That's part of the reason why they're given the leverage that they're given. Okay, now speaking of that, they're also most certainly a product of this. And this next thing is big. And the guys on Rambo and Friends had this lined up for their D-Class show on Saturday. And I watched it, and they didn't go into depth, really, as much as they should have. They might go into depth in another show, but I already had this lined up to discuss here on today's episode. And it has to do with the United States Department of Education taking the initial steps at ending the American Bar Association's ability to accredit law schools. This is something, again, that the United States Department of Education should have always been doing, except for the fact that, as we know, depending on the administration that is in place, those individuals who are the heads of the education department at the federal level, they can make the accreditation easy for any law school or any school if they want to, or they can make it remarkably rigid and hard. But the fact is that a lot of these law schools are recruiting individuals specifically in the interest of overthrowing the United States. Again, these law schools are very left-wing, almost all of them. It's probably not every single one, clearly. There are some very well-known conservative ones, but the vast majority are hard left-wing. and the professors within them are hard left wing. So one of the ways, of course, that you can stem that tide is you go after their ability to do the thing that they have to do in order to exist. Again, I think it's a good move. But at the same time, what does that mean in the long term if you're not really going to get rid of the U.S. Department of Education? Ultimately, again, if you're going to take away in the future the accrediting capability of the American Bar Association to accredit law schools, then who's going to take over that responsibility if the U.S. Department of Education ceases to exist? Is that going to be the Department of Justice? Is that going to be the Labor Department? I mean, who's to say? The Treasury? They would control the money, clearly. But it would have to be passed off to someone else, and then the question becomes, okay, who gets into those positions later in the future then? And then what moves do they make to maybe continue the accreditation process and make it even easier for these individuals to be accredited? Which, let's face it, if they're hard left wing and they're accredited as law schools, they want to pump out as many graduates as humanly possible because their goal is to flood the judicial system. Again, judges, lawyers, prosecutors, defense attorneys, you name it, with everybody who is just like them, who hold their political values. That, too, again, is how you overthrow a country. You take over these systems and these licensing capabilities of these systems, specifically the education ones, and then you just turn it hard left wing as much as humanly possible, and then you throw it back to the public, which means a morally sound individual wouldn't have an opportunity to become a lawyer, let alone want to become one, unless, again, they're built differently. They can see it as a corrupt institution, by and large, and that the real law needs to be defended appropriately, and that real criminals need to be gone after, and that real rights need to be stood up for. I mean, those individuals would be getting in it for all of the right reasons, and that would be fantastic. They would be outnumbered, probably. But even so, if these schools end up getting accredited and then they just turn into diploma mills for individuals who want law degrees, and then, of course, they dumb down the system and they make it easier for individuals to pass the bar exam and then everything else, well, then you're just giving out law degrees to just about anybody. Hell, at this stage of the game, why not give out a law degree to an illegal alien? I bet illegal aliens have law degrees in this country. Why wouldn't they? So let me read this little breakdown of this and exactly, again, how this seems to be playing out. A lot of different sources on this one: Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, Just the News, USA News, Inside Higher Ed. So here's the breakdown, and here's what it says. It says the ABA, American Bar Association, through its independent sounding council, has been the sole national accreditor for law schools. Federal recognition by the Department of Education is required for an accreditor's approval to allow school access to federal student loan funds. Title IV aid. It says in most states, only graduates of ABA-accredited schools can sit for the bar exam to become licensed attorneys. The department last renewed the ABA's recognition in 2021 for a 5-year term, with review due in 2026. The process involves staff analysis, review by a bipartisan National Advisory Committee on Institutional Quality and Integrity, the NACIQI, a senior department official's decision, and possible appeal to the Education Secretary, Linda McMahon. This action escalates a broader feud. In April of 2025, President Trump issued an executive order directing the Education Secretary to assist suspending or terminating the ABA as an accreditor, citing its unlawful diversity, equity, and inclusion requirements. Conservatives have long criticized the ABA as promoting progressive ideological agendas, including DEI policies for law school faculty, staff, and previous admissions. Absolutely. Even A.J. Gochick's son, I think, had to experience some of that at the school where he goes. When A.J. was on last, he discussed that openly. Some states, for example, like Texas, have already moved to reduce or end reliance on ABA accreditation for bar eligibility. The department's findings and recommendation. Department staff released a detailed report describing in coverage as roughly 86 pages publicly, with references to a longer 500 approximate page analysis, concluding that the ABA's accreditation arm is out of compliance with federal regulations and recognition standards in numerous ways, nearly 30 cited in some reports. Key issues included: the first one listed here is a lack of sufficient independence. The Council is not adequately separate and independent from the larger ABA professional organization, a membership group of lawyers, 4 lawyers rather. Federal rules require accreditors to avoid conflicts of interest and operate independently, so they focus on education rather than professional or political interests. Staff argued the ties undermine effectiveness. Of course. Again, they're ideologues. They're not interested in really teaching the law. They're interested in how to skirt the law, just like school teachers by and large. They're not really interested in teaching the truth. They're interested in indoctrination based on their own belief system. It's the same thing. The next one said DEI and related standards. The ABA was faulted for being too slow to revise or fully eliminate rules requiring law schools to demonstrate commitment to diversity and inclusion. For example, Standard 206 on faculty staff diversity by gender, race, and ethnicity, and related provisions. These were suspended in early 2025 after the Supreme Court's affirmative action ruling and administrative pressure, but not fully repealed promptly. Again, they dig in like ticks. They're not going to give it up. Again, they're proving that they're breaking the law. The Supreme Court makes a ruling and then they're like, nah, I don't think so. We'll just do what we want anyway. They're telling everybody who they are. It says further votes, rather, to pare them down or repeal were planned around the time of the report. And then lastly, it says broader criticism of the accreditation model. Assistant Secretary of Education David Barker described accreditation as operating like a cartel, quote unquote. With little competition, accreditors can inject political preferences or ideologies into their work rather than strictly ensuring quality. Of course. The staff recommendation is that the ABA's recognition should not be renewed. Process and next steps as of late August here, 2026. This is only the first formal step in the regular recognition renewal process. The NACIQI, scheduled to meet in September 23rd, 24th of this year, 2026, reviews the staff report and the ABA's response, then votes on its own recommendation. The ABA's representatives, including past leadership, are expected to appear and argue compliance. A senior department official under Secretary Nicholas Kent makes a decision. Then the ABA can appeal to Education Secretary Linda McMahon, and then a final decision is months away and not guaranteed. The ABA responses have emphasized that the Council complies with federal laws and department requirements, views this as a standard step in the periodic review, and is confident that it can address concerns at the hearing. The Council has moved to further scale back or repeal remaining DEI-related standards. Now again, I'm going to keep reading this description. There's just a little more to go here, but here's the problem, and you've heard me say this before, and you know this. You can't get it out of the minds of the people who are in these institutions. You would have to lobotomize everybody. You would have to deprogram all of the individuals who are brainwashed NPC programmed people into believing the truth and understanding what the real truth is about the real world that we live in before you could ever completely root out any of this DEI nonsense, regardless of whatever, political ideology they have or some, specific characteristic that they espouse. You would have to lobotomize them, which means if all you're doing is moving around paperwork, that's fine and dandy. But even if the accreditation process gets stripped from the ABA and their ability to accredit themselves, then again, and accredit rather other universities and law schools specifically, I would tell individuals again that that's not likely to occur. Again, these people will dig in. And you can't give brain transplants or lobotomize them because, again, that's the only thing that's really going to fix any of this. I like the approach. They're taking the legal approach to unlawful people. But if you expect unlawful people to comply with the lawful approach, well, that's going to be tough, which means ultimately you're going to have to squeeze them completely to the point where they're not even allowed to exist. That's the move that we'd like to see, I think, eventually. that if these places don't comply, they need to have their doors locked up, shut down, and then a wrecking ball come in and tear down these schools. I'm 100% fine with that. The other problem too, and this is a huge problem, and I, of course, alluded to it earlier, and even I think Niccolo Machiavelli would openly agree with me here on this, because I think he stated it first. When you bring in foreigners into your country to do anything political, let alone the specificity of entering a law school to become a lawyer, if you expect that foreigner, who again isn't born here, or maybe is a first-generation American to foreign-born parents, you can't expect that foreigner to defend the United States Constitution. You can't expect that foreigner who becomes a lawyer to defend the law and the country. They're always going to put their existence first. They're going to put their political ideology next, if that isn't first. And then, of course, they're going to push their own religion, regardless of what religion that may be, either in line with those previous two, or they're going to put that next. That's going to be their driving force. Their driving force is not going to be constitutional law, human rights. That's not it. And they would, of course, even twist that saying, and they'd be like, well, I support human rights, and that means supporting illegal aliens and giving everybody a hand up and a hand out and a second chance, regardless of if they rape, steal, kill, whatever. I mean, they would say that, and they would trick themselves into believing that that's the way that things get done, because that's actually what many believe, whether they be foreign-born or not. But expecting, again, these individuals in these schools specifically to allow for their DEI policies to continue to remain, which, again, let's face it, they're interested in a hard left-wing ideology, in particular a foreign-born one. Why is that the case? It's not because they love our country. It's not because those schools like natural-born Americans who are even conservative or right down the middle and see things as fairly as humanly possible from a constitutional standpoint. It's because misery loves company. They need the same kinds of ideologies around them as much as humanly possible. And there's plenty to pick from. They don't have to just pick from the United States. They can pick from foreign countries too. It wraps up here. It says potential impacts. 3 generally. Federal student aid being one of them. Freestanding, non-university affiliated law schools, approximately 13, that rely solely on ABA accreditation for Title IV eligibility would face the biggest disruption and would need a new recognized accreditor. University-affiliated schools might shift to their institution's regional accreditor. Again, if they reach out to a local institution from that law school, how do you think that local institution is going to accredit the law school? I mean, they're going to accredit them. Because if one is left-wing, then the other is left-wing by chance, and, well, birds of a feather flock together. Bar eligibility and licensing is the next one. It says in many states, lack of ABA accreditation could block graduates from taking the bar exam unless states change their rules, and some are already reviewing this. And then finally, broader effects. It could open the door to more competition among accreditors, force changes in legal education standards, and further reduce the ABA's influence. Critics of the move warn of politicization of accreditation and disruption to legal education quality and access. Supporters see it as ending monopoly power over ideological requirements. In short, the department is formally recommending against reviewing the ABA Council's accrediting authority due to independence failures and related compliance issues tied to long-standing complaints about ideology and DEI. The process is multi-stage, with hearings in September of this year, 2026, and a final outcome later. Revocation is possible, but not yet decided. This fits into the administration's wider efforts to reform higher education accreditation and reduce what it views as progressive capture of institutions, unquote. Good. You got to start someplace, go after the very thing that they all need, that they all want. That basically, again, allows them to exist in the first place. And if they don't comply, like I said, shut them down. But who knows? Apparently they can find accreditation somewhere else, and if they just go next door to one of their other higher education institutions for accreditation, then that's probably what they're going to do. But that's not necessarily going to fix the problem. Again, the real problem is between the ears of the individuals who get pumped out of these schools and are on the wrong side of history and are on the wrong side of the Constitution. You can see these individuals, by the way, consistently in these senatorial hearings, specifically at the DC level. And these senators, again, asking them questions about basic law, and they can't answer the question. Or they'll be asked again about specific cases that they've overseen, and they have very little experience. It's an interesting process to watch, but again, it's also showing what these institutions are pumping out, and it's pumping out a lot of individuals who are, again, on the wrong side of the law, which means they're going to get into whatever position they're going to get into, and they're just going to rehash and recycle their own ideologies onto anybody else, and then carry out their judicial proceedings or their legal proceedings with that always in mind. Now, speaking of that right there is exactly, again, what the American K12 school system does. And as we know, states create a lot of this curriculum development, so to speak, for American schools. And they also create these particular standards, certainly from a legal standpoint, that tell schools exactly what they have to teach. Some people like it, some people don't. Again, that's government. And government is mind control to a great extent, and individuals always have a particular interest, regardless of how so-called conservative the particular plan may end up being, even if it's a very liberal program that's implemented within a school system or a school district or a statewide, again, public school domain. Everybody has their hand in the cookie jar. Now, I've brought this up in the past, but this goes into effect right now, which is exactly why I'm bringing this up now, because I brought it up when it was first proposed, and then I brought it up again when the law was passed. It has to do with teaching about communism and the perils, quote unquote, of communism within Florida schools. Now, the question, again, at face value, which I brought up many months ago, if not well over a year ago, is the following. If you really wanted to teach them about communism, you would have to teach them who created communism. That's where it has to start. That's the cliche question that a school teacher would have to pull out their dry erase marker and write on the board on the very first day of this so-called instruction. Who created communism? ? Go around the room, let everybody, again, answer the question as best they can. And what answer do you think is going to fly out of the mouths of American school children? They'll say something like, the Chinese. And then the one Asian kid will feel awkward in the class. It was Pang. His people did it. I mean, something like that. I mean, that'll create, again, conflict right out of the gate. And it's conflict based on a lie. Because the Chinese didn't create communism. Communism is a construct of Zionism. That's it. Communism is in the Talmud. It goes back even further than that. Communism was created by Zionist Jews. But that's not going to be taught in American schools. And you can already see this playing out. It's in Florida, after all, which, again, high Jewish population in Florida. So why on earth, not to mention as this was being taught, as this was rather being signed into law, you probably had rabbis standing right behind Ron DeSantis as he's signing this into law. And they're rubbing their hands together because they love it. Why? Not because anybody's going to criticize Zionism or Jews in this instruction. It's because this legislation was written on purpose to distract from the fact that Zionist Jews were the ones who created communism. That's the entire point. Get control of the very thing that you want individuals to know. Get control of the Overton window from both sides as much as humanly possible. Don't let it shift from side to side, creating a clear view of what the actual truth is. Just grab a hold of it, create legislation, create then law, and sign into law actual instruction that keeps people from finding out that you yourselves were the ones who created communism. And if you think about it, it's brilliant. But that's exactly what they're doing here. But I wanted to get into the law specifically and exactly show everybody what it states, because I guarantee, here's what it doesn't state. And you couldn't get away with this you couldn't get away with this if you tried. Even if you had high school students sign off a permission slip to show this particular documentary. Not a chance in hell would it ever exist in an American school, and you would only have to show the first episode. That's it. Maybe even the first 2 episodes of the documentary Europa: The Last Battle. Those 2 first portions, those 2 parts, go right into who created communism, what the result of communism is, and the death that has been doled out as a result of communism existing. That right there is inescapable, because even there it describes how Zionist Jews taught it to the Chinese, how Zionist Jews taught it to Cambodians and Cubans and everybody else. They didn't just, all those different countries in those different geographic areas didn't just wake up and go, here's what we're going to do. They were taught it. And they were taught it by that very specific clique of people. Because again, they were the ones that made it up. So here's the specificity of this particular law. Florida requires public schools to teach the history of communism, quote unquote, as required instruction under state law, with detailed academic standards emphasizing its origin, tactics, atrocities, failures, and contrast with American founding principles of freedom and democracy. Now, if anybody believes that government teachers within high schools, specifically public schools in general, are going to take an accurate approach to any of this, I would say that you are sorely mistaken. The vast majority, if not all of them, who teach government within American public schools have no idea that Zionists created communism. They don't have a clue. So what are they going to do? Are they going to go back to school themselves and actually learn about this? Of course not. They're lazy. So what they're going to do is they're going to espouse their own belief system, their own ideologies, and they might cherry pick a few things off of AI that justify their particular stances on certain things. And then, if they themselves are a leftist and a communist, which let's face it, many of them are, when that happens, they're going to say things like this, and you'll hear this. I swear to you, as water is wet. They'll say, well, there's some good things with communism that get a bad rap. Not all things with communism are bad. Let me give you an example. And then they'll run down this example of particular things, and they'll try to, again, butter it up, put some flowers on it, and make it sound like it has not been the thing that has killed the most people on the face of the planet. They'll never bring up the Holodomor. They'll never bring any of that up. They'll never bring up how wars being created is solely created for the purpose of spreading communism. They'll never mention that. They'll never mention, again, its Jewish Zionist origins. They'll never mention that either. They'll never mention how communism specifically targets Christians and slaughters them for fun. They'll never mention that. They won't mention where and how that's still taking place to this day, Israel. They'll never bring that up. Which means, again, they're going to get an after-school special, watered-down version of whatever it is that they think they want their students to understand. Not a chance is the real thing actually going to be taught. Not a chance. Let alone that communists exist in our country, in our government, and are always trying to upend the Constitution and the rule of law. But either way, I digress. Let me go on with the bill here. It says this is not a standalone mandatory course for all students in every grade, but it's integrated into social studies, history, civics, government, economics, etc., with optional high school electives available. Instruction must be age and developmentally appropriate. Well, if you're really going to teach communism, you have to show someone being shot in the back of the head, or shot in the face, or stripped naked and raped. I mean, that's communism. Which again, that's why you're not going to see or hear about anything within the first 2 parts of Europa: The Last Battle within an American school. It just won't happen. But that's the best lesson to learn about communism. It really is. It says the law specifically, Senate Bill 1264, Chapter 2024-102, signed this into law on April 17th of 2024. It amended Florida statutes subsection 1003.42, required instruction, by adding paragraph 5. Key provisions: beginning in the 26-27 school year, instructional staff must teach the history of communism. Instruction must be age-appropriate and developmentally appropriate and must include the following. A through F. Here we go. The history of communism in the United States and domestic communist movements, including their histories and tactics. Again, good luck having that taught accurately. B. Atrocities committed in foreign countries under the guidance of communism. Not a chance. Somebody will mention Cuba, somebody will mention Vietnam, China, Asians in general, but the real perpetrators will not be brought up because the drafters of this law specifically don't want them to be brought up. Not to mention, I should throw this in the pot, why not? What if your instructor's Jewish? Do you really believe that they themselves are going to get as accurate as humanly possible as to the origins and foundation of communism? I'm not going to put my eggs in that basket. Letter C here, comparative discussion of political ideologies such as communism and totalitarianism. Well, that's what Donald Trump is, so they're the same. That's what you'll hear also. Which conflict with the principles of freedom and democracy. Well, democracy, please. There's that word again. Essential to the founding principles of the United States. How about constitutional republic? How about that? Letter D, the increasing threat of communism in the United States and to our allies through the 20th century, including the events of the Cultural Revolution in the People's Republic of China, there you go, and other mass killings from communist regimes. Well, Bolshevik communists killed more people than China's ever killed. But you'll never hear about that because they were the ones that learned it. They were the ones that created it. Letter E, the economic, industrial, and political events that have preceded and anticipated communist revolutions. Well, this is so easy. You're never going to hear in an American school that the German army in the 1930s' sole mission was to root out communism. That's literally what fascism means. It's the antithesis of communism. It was created for that purpose. That's what a National Socialist is. A National Socialist is an individual who loves their nation, loves God, and wants to give back to their family and their people in their own nation. Fascism was just a political party that also agreed with that. That was created, of course, by Benito Mussolini. But either way, you're not going to hear any of that. You'll never hear the Germans and the Italians were the good guys, and that they were doing whatever they had to do to beat back communism. You'll never hear the very famous quotes from General George S. Patton saying that we fought the wrong enemy. We should have destroyed communism because that's what the Germans were doing. The Germans were the best people in Europe. They were the only ones that had been overrun with communism, Jewish Zionism, Freemasonry, the banking system, all of it. And then they voted in Adolf Hitler and got rid of it. They didn't slaughter people in the streets and gas people. That's not what happened. But that's what communism causes. That's what communists did. Again, this is, this is not going to cut it. Not for the knowledgeable. And then finally, F, the communist policies of Cuba. There you go. And the spread of communist ideologies throughout Latin America, including the roots of the Communist Party of Cuba and guerrilla forces throughout Latin America. I didn't hear Zionist Jew anywhere in any of that. Did you? It's like having a course on how to bake a cake, but you don't touch on who the first person or group of people was who started baking cakes and why they started doing it, and then who they taught. I mean, you can take any subject. You kind of want to start at the beginning. That's called scaffolding. It's not tough. But it's tough for the unknowledgeable. That's where this is, again, that's where the rub is going to be. It says the Florida Department of Education must prepare and offer standards for this instruction and may seek input from victims of communism or recognized organizations dedicated to victims of communism. Well, who do you think's going to fill that void? Who's going to swoop in and talk about all of that? I mean, in Florida, you're going to get some, I don't know, old Cubans showing up to a classroom to discuss what it was like when they or their parents or grandparents were living under communist Cuba, which of course still exists. But what you're never going to see is you're never going to see an individual show up and describe how Zionist Jews were the ones who created communism. It'll never happen. In fact, what you'll probably end up with are a few field trips to the Holocaust Museum. And they'll tell you again that the Holocaust was created by communists. And that's not true. It's the exact opposite, and the Holocaust didn't happen. It's a communist construct. It's again a communist fairy tale to cover up who the real communists were. It's amazing to me. I find this astounding. This is why you have to homeschool your children. Related earlier law. In 2022, House Bill 395 established Victims of Communism Day. I covered that on the show, November 7th. Apparently it's November 7th. High school students in the required U.S. government course must receive at least 45 minutes of instruction that day on communist regimes and victim suffering. For example, poverty, starvation, political violence, suppression of speech, religion, covering figures, regimes such as Vladimir Lenin, here we go, Joseph Stalin, Mao Zedong, Fidel Castro, and Pol Pot. Okay. Let's start with Lenin. Let's get into him first and his henchmen around him. What was the one thing they all had in common? Academic standards, it says the State Board of Education approved the History of Communism standards in November of 2025 for implementation in the 26-27 school year, and these form a dedicated strand in these social studies standards, roughly 29 to 30 pages, developed by Florida educators and content experts. Oh, I'm sure. It goes on, it says there are no specific HC standards or benchmarks for grades K through 5, and they significantly expand in grades 9 through 12, but the standards begin in grade 6, it says. Many districts integrate the material into existing courses rather than offering the two dedicated high school electives, History of Communism 1 and 2. Well, again, if they do offer an actual class, an elective, there's no chance it's going to be taught accurately. It does say updates have been added, or updates rather have added topics such as the Maduro regime in Venezuela. Grade level overview, grade 6, failure of ancient communal systems. For example, and this is where they attack the Romans, Spartan communal life and dependency on Helots slaves, Roman latifundia, I'm saying that right, and slave labor, limited trade, and innovation. That's for grade 6. Grade 7, effects of communist governments on freedom, participation, and economy. Censorship of speech, press, dissent, religion. Failures of central planning such as Soviet 5-year plans and China's Great Leap Forward comparisons of political violence. Again, I don't hear Bolshevism anywhere in this. Grade 8, early American attempts at communal living, Jamestown and Plymouth Colony collectivism, leading to a lack of incentives, starvation, and shift to private ownership, failures of utopian experiments like Brook Farm. Okay, so we're attacking the Pilgrims and we're attacking the Romans and whom else? Grade 9 through 12 then, extensive analysis under SS 912HC standards, intellectual, political, economic origins, utopian thought, for example, Plato's Republic, More's Utopia. Again, as I've said before, some would say that Plato was sort of the originator of communism to an extent, but, that can be argued. I understand the points that he was making, and of course we live in a different time. But either way, Enlightenment influences French Revolution, Industrial Revolution, Marx, Engels' Communist Manifesto, class struggle, abolition of private property, revolution, violence, forced labor, dismantling of family, religion, education, comparisons to U.S. Bill of Rights, and distinctions from socialism. Okay, to start, looks like it might turn a little here. Let's see. Tactics and tools of communist movements and states, total information control and propaganda, secret police, terror, Cheka, KGB, Stasi, gulags, Holodomor famine as a weapon. All right. There we go. Grades 9 through 12 get a little bit of the Holodomor. But then again, that depends on who's doing the instructing. Religious persecution, it says, fear, show trials, and purges. Travel restrictions, Iron Curtain, Berlin Wall, suppression of individual rights, centralized control of production, and creation of a new ruling class. Propaganda to gain and maintain power, cults of personality, manufactured crises, youth indoctrination, Potemkin villages, and historical erasure. Rise, development, decline, and collapse of Soviet Union and related topics on China, Cuba, Cambodia, Russian Revolution, Red Terror, Stalin's policies, Cold War events, Gorbachev's reforms, fall of the Berlin Wall, dissolution of the USSR. Goes on, it says communism in the United States, domestic movements and tactics, infiltration of civil rights, labor, arts, and other groups via front organizations, espionage, Rosenbergs, there we go, for example, Alger Hiss, responses including the House Un-American Activities Committee and Senator Joseph McCarthy framed as champions of anti-communism, McCarthyism, he was a champion of anti-communism, as an insult and slander against anti-communists, terms like red baiter and red scare, later developments. Well, again, you're going to have to cover Black Lives Matter then. You're going to have to cover APAC. I mean, you're going to have to cover a lot of these NGOs and these groups and lobbies that have funded communism and continue to do so. Resistance to communism internationally, NATO, they say, anti-communist movements, CIA, etc. Well, NATO is communist. That's rich. Evolution of movements into the 20th and 21st centuries, alliances, modern propaganda, including media tech, UN influence, and consequences. Finally, death toll estimates from the Black Book of Communism, approximately 100 million or higher democide figures, policies causing poverty, starvation, repression, and dehumanization. Contrast with American ideals of individual rights, property, and liberty. What little country over there slaughtered a bunch of people in Gaza? What country did that? What country engaged in policies causing poverty, starvation, repression, and dehumanization, which contrast with American ideals of individual rights, property, and liberty? Could it be our greatest ally? It's disgusting. Officials have described the standards as ensuring students learn the brutal realities, dangers, and evils, and catastrophic failures of communism to appreciate liberty and resist indoctrination. Critics include some historians and educators argue that standards are ideological, present a one-sided view of especially rehabilitating McCarthyism while downplaying its excesses, and prioritize telling students what to think over critical analysis. That's from the Associated Press, of course. Implementation is underway for the 26-27 school year, which began already, and materials and textbooks are expected to align with these standards, and districts must ensure compliance. The focus remains on historical accuracy as defined by the law and broad approved benchmarks, with a strong emphasis on the human cost of communist regimes and their incompatibility with democratic principles, unquote. Well, again, it is democracy. Communism is mob rule. Those two words go hand in hand. So, this is going to get interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if in the short future here, some teachers end up getting cut loose because they start to teach about Zionism. And somebody's not going to like that. Remember, discretion is going to be used in these schools regarding this instruction and any kind of instruction. If the educator, so to speak, is favored in the building, then they'll have free rein to do whatever it is that they want to do and explain anything in any way that they want. If they're not favored, for example, and they tell the truth about the origins of communism and they accurately, again, point students into particular directions of other things to watch, listen to, and read about when it comes to the real horrors of communism and the architects of it. If that teacher's not favored, that teacher's likely to lose their job. And they'll end up on the evening news. Or they'll quit. Or, again, whatever will happen. But it'll end up being an audio clip. It'll find its way to YouTube. It'll find its way to mainstream news outlets. This is an inevitability, I am certain. Now, speaking of that, and of course, we're back to school already, and the crazies are already coming out of the woodwork. Didn't take long. I've got a few audio clips here I want to play, just one back to back to back. So here's the first one. Again, this has to do with the shock gloves. I know I played audio from it in the past, but now individuals came out of the woodwork, came to the school board meeting, and started complaining about the shock gloves. Who didn't see this coming? Not to mention, it's leftists complaining about it because cops would probably end up using this on minority students who don't comply, who can't apparently comprehend English, among other individuals. But, again, they're coming here to basically defend individuals who are consistent lawbreakers because they think that shock gloves are immoral. Well, I find it shocking, no pun intended, although kind of, that shock gloves, number one, are a thing, and number two, are being used in American schools. It should just show everybody again that the business is in the sewer. So, but not for the reasons that we'd think, just like the flock cameras. They want them gone because they do hold people accountable. But that's not the reason to get rid of them, just like these shock gloves. They want them gone because they hold people accountable, but that's not the reason they want them gone. Give this a listen in 3, 2, 1.
Do any of the school resource officers here tonight have those gloves on them? If so, I'm willing and I'm volunteering to be shocked right here, right now.
Tensions high at a public school board meeting in Omaha, Nebraska.
Learn how to de-escalate. Be an adult.
I think vulnerable students have been placed in danger without guardians made aware of the risk.
Parents, students, and members of the community speaking out after learning that, according to Omaha's NBC affiliate, most school resource officers in the district's middle and high schools carried shock gloves, like the ones soon to be used by ICE officers. Last week, ICE announced it plans to purchase $20 million worth of electric gloves for its officers. Both the Omaha police and the manufacturer have done on-camera demos.
Based on how these gloves are being advertised, they are being used on adult men, and they are falling to the ground in pain. What's to say if these gloves are being used on a 6th grader who is just in an overstimulated state?
The Omaha mayor and police chief, in a joint statement Monday, said the gloves were used twice during the last school year, including in a program for students with learning deficits. Writing, "We believe it is the safest use of force option and the rare times when it is used." But late Tuesday, Omaha police announcing they will no longer use the glove in schools after community pushback and a request from the superintendent. The police chief writing, "We will adhere to that request," adding that OPD officers will forever carry standard issue equipment, including tasers, OC spray, batons, and firearms to ensure the protection of others and themselves. But parents with children in Omaha are still upset.
If there's a hair harmed on their head, then I'm going to exercise my rights as a human being, as a father, to protect not only my children, but all the children in the community.
Meanwhile, the glove has been advertised at least 2 school resource officer conferences in Mississippi and Texas.
Julia Ainsley joins Top Story tonight. So, Julia, where do things stand right now with ICE and these gloves you were just showing us?
Well, Tom, I actually just spoke to a senior DHS official tonight who said that contract has not yet been finalized, but they expect it to be within the next 2 weeks. What we reported last week was that they had found a supplier, Compliant Technologies, and chosen the gloves that they want to use. And despite this public backlash, including how the gloves are used locally, like in schools, and people saying that I should not be using these in the fields, this official tells me they have every intention to move forward. And it's just a matter of how quickly they can get enough of these gloves out to every ICE officer in the field. They say it will be done as the latest March.
Did you catch what that black dad said? That if anybody uses the gloves on his kid, he's going to retaliate. How's he going to retaliate? Is that going to be peaceful? Is that going to be a parent conference? A strongly worded letter, perhaps? I don't think so. That homeboy's going to retaliate with violence. He's going to go look for a cop. He's going to go look for the teacher who filed the complaint against whatever, his kid, for whatever reason. He openly admitted it. Again, this is NBC News, the national NBC News, not a local affiliate. They just aired that. You talk about the media being the enemy of the people. They just gave that guy a national platform to say he's going to retaliate against cops or anybody in the school building who uses those gloves on his kid. Well, would they have a reason to use those gloves on his kid? Probably. Why else would he be saying such a thing? I'm telling you what. These systems, these environments, these parents, and districts as a whole, they invite these problems in. They invite them in. Case in point, this next one. Give this a listen in 3, 2, 1.
County parents continue to be divided over an elementary school teacher's gender identity. It's been a topic of public comment at the last 2 school board meetings. It's all over the hiring of a music teacher at a local elementary school who parents say is transgender. Parents concerned about the hire are suggesting a gender-neutral dress code as a solution. Others feel there are bigger issues the board needs to focus on. WRAL's Sean Gallagher is at the Wake School's headquarters in Cary. Sean, break this all down for us. What else are parents discussing?
Yeah, Ashley, some of the parents who have concerns about this want the ability to opt out of this music class. And opting out because of a religious exemption is something the district offers, but it's unclear if it could be used here. Wake County parents are divided about an elementary school music teacher they say is transgender.
Parents should have advance notice and the option to opt out.
Don't let outside political pressure decide how you treat the people who work in your schools.
We've chosen not to name either the teacher or the school involved here to protect that teacher's identity. State law requires families to have the ability to opt out of certain lessons that they object to on religious grounds. Religious exemptions also allow families to opt out of immunizations and some other things explicitly spelled out in state law. Wake School's Policy Code 3510 says parents can petition to opt out of a, quote, specific classroom discussion, activity, or assigned reading that they feel would impose a substantial burden on the student's religious beliefs. But neither state law nor Wake School Board policy explicitly says families have the ability to opt out of a class for objecting to the teacher.
Our elementary schools should be places where children learn reading, writing, math, music, science, and history. They are not to be places where they're expected to navigate adult topics of sex and gender.
They're not providing lessons on gender or sexuality. To the best of my understanding, they're providing the curriculum required by this county and the state. But apparently the mere existence of a human being is now to be considered a lesson.
Now, because of how divisive this topic is, we continue to press Wake County Schools for answers about when or if they plan to address this with the parents here and how it plans to strike the balance between the rights of parents and the rights of teachers as employees. I'm told that they are working on a response right now. In Wake County, Sean Gallagher, WRAL News.
Again, these news people, you gotta hand it to them. I mean, they're they think you're stupid. I'll just put it that way. We don't want to tell people the name of the school, and we don't want to tell people the name of the instructor. Like I can't figure that out right now. Middle Creek Elementary School, ladies and gentlemen, in Apex, Wake County, North Carolina, has the transgender, non-binary music teacher Teacher's name is Aria Derrick, previously known as Canon Derrick. Derrick is a biological male who identifies as non-binary transgender, presents as female, wearing dresses, skirts, etc., and is referred to as Miss by students. The hire for the 26-27 school year at this elementary school serving young children, including kindergarten, has drawn significant local and national attention, parents' complaints, school board debates, and social media coverage since late July of 2026. Again, if you send your children to a building where that's the case, it's the parents' problem then. It's that simple. If you send your child to an inner city location in the dead of night by themselves, smelling like dope with loose change in their pockets, the result of what's going to happen to that person, that child, is your fault. This is not hard. This is not difficult to figure out here. Here's the next piece of audio. California teacher placed on leave after posting alarming videos to social media. What? Educators posting on social media stupid shit? No way. Give this a listen in 3, 2, 1.
Cater investigated. In a now viral video, a Madera Unified special education teacher is seen making comments about starting a, quote, black militia, and encouraged others in the community to find and join her to, quote, rob some white people. Another clip shows her loading several firearms and laughing. The concerning videos posted to the teacher's Instagram account quickly prompting online backlash and a multi-agency investigation. Good evening and thank you for joining us for Action News Live at 11. I'm Christina Lopez. That educator is now on administrative leave and temporarily barred from Madera Unified School District property. Action News reporter Carrie Mannix brings us the videos now under investigation and the exclusive reaction from that teacher that you'll see only on Action News tonight. Carrie.
Christina, police in both Fresno and Madera are investigating those videos taken and posted by Kanisha Daly. Daly, who lives in Fresno, told me today she is cooperating with police and viewed what you're about to see as entertainment.
Starting today, I'm starting a black militia. So if you're black, if you want to shoot some guns, come find me. We're going to rob some white people.
Police are investigating these videos posted to Instagram by a special education teacher for the Madera Unified School District. In one clip, Kanisha Daly of Fresno says she's starting a black militia and will rob some white people. Other videos on Daly's Instagram captured by concerned citizens show her with a handgun and then what appears to be a long gun. The videos were quickly met with strong online backlash and a multi-agency investigation. Fresno and Madera Police and the Madera Unified School District all told Action News they're aware of the videos and looking into them. In the meantime, the Lincoln Elementary School special education teacher was placed on leave and under a temporary restraining order.
Just wanting to do something, to be in action.
Daly has appeared in our newscast several times. In July of 2024, she received free braces as a part of the Smiles for Teachers program and said this as a guest during Action News Live at 3.
I realize that I am an avenue for my students to be able to integrate into classrooms, into the community. And so I'm a reflection of them. And so I have to make sure that I'm reflecting the best parts of them.
More recently, she attended a community meeting with Fresno Police back in March and demanded more accountability and transparency over the department's use of military equipment.
Even though we have these meetings, we raise some concerns, and the major ones are still not going to be addressed.
With the controversial videos now under investigation and circulating online, Daly told me in a statement that she viewed the post as entertainment and never meant to threaten, harm, or alarm anyone. She went on to say she is genuinely heartbroken that a careless post has caused people to question her character and the trust they have placed in her. For anyone who had been impacted or made to feel uncomfortable, I am truly sorry. Daly told me she spoke to police who found no threat, but police are not commenting further as the investigation is ongoing. Madera Unified says they are developing long-term safety measures in response to this incident. Reporting from our studio, Carrie Mannix, ABC 30 Action News.
That robbing white people at gunpoint is entertainment. That's what she believes. She excuses that as being entertainment. flashing guns, let's go rob some white people, start a black militia. Nah, we've always been judging you by the content of your character. We haven't been judging you by the color of your skin. We judge you by the content of your character. Always. Just so happens the same cards keep turning up. Honestly. She's deranged. Fire her. But she has a nose ring and she's a black female, so, she's going to get favored. Suspended for a little while, then she'll come back. It's disgusting. It's California, after all. I'm going to play one more here. We'll save the rest for Jesse's show over there, Dangerous Info Podcast. But get a load of this one. It has to do with Ohio schools and how they basically have new attendance requirements, where basically the school has to tally how many minutes the child is actually out of the class. So it doesn't matter the excuse. If you're sick, if you have a dentist appointment, if you have to leave a particular class period for a certain amount of time, they encourage the parent to bring the child right back as soon as humanly possible, or else. Truancy. And then a court gets called, and then a knock on your door. Again, you don't have to play these government games when you walk away from government and you homeschool. But play government games, win government prizes. Give this a listen in 3, 2, 1.
As students head back to class, parents may start hearing from their child's school sooner about missed days.
And here's why. Ohio districts are starting the school year with new attendance requirements. And Education Station reporter Danielle Wiggins breaks down what's changed now and what parents and students need to know.
Empty halls and empty desks are okay during summer break.
The biggest change for us has been the change to chronic absenteeism.
But vacant seats are detrimental once school is back in session.
Every minute counts. So if your child's late to school, those minutes count. If they have a doctor's appointment, those minutes count. They all count towards chronic absenteeism.
Heather Dodd leads pupil services in Willoughby Eastlake schools.
We saw really good gains.
According to district data, 10 out of 11 of their schools improved chronic absenteeism after early implementation of the state's new attendance laws. The big change? Ohio has shifted from focusing on truancy, which is a string of unexcused absences, to supporting students at risk of becoming chronically absent. That's defined as missing at least 10% of the minimum required instructional hours.
It's just recognizing that it's tracked in hours too, not days. And so that every hour missed does count toward those.
Schools now have to notify families once a student misses 5% of instructional hours, or roughly 7.5 to 8.5 school days, depending on grade level. Both excused and unexcused absences count toward that total, something Kenna Haycox with the Ohio School Boards Association says parents need to know.
Your student may hit that 10% chronic absence. And so then what are the next steps?
Districts are required to have absence intervention teams to help students at risk of becoming chronically absent. The focus isn't punishment, but partnership.
And truancy is still part of the law, so if a student doesn't make progress to improving unexcused absences, which the definition varies by district, school officials will file a complaint in juvenile court. Christy.
All right. Good heads up there for us, Danielle. Thank you.
My quick analysis on that one is this. They're punishing the whole for the actions of a few. That's basically it. They want everybody to be compliant. They want everybody to be there because what they don't want to do is they don't want to tell people that minority students are typically the ones who are chronically absent. They don't want to say that. So they have to create a blanket policy for everybody that forces everybody to show up. But let's face it, if they're already not showing up consistently, they're still going to be the problem students who don't show up consistently. It's not going to matter what the policy change is. If they don't want to show up and they don't care, then they're not going to show up because they don't care. So there's that. Okay, I've got way more, but again, we'll cover it on the Dangerous Info podcast with the fellas over there. 2 jab-related things, one quick piece of audio here, and then I'm going to wrap this up. This shouldn't surprise anybody first, but this is an old May 2021, May 6th memo from Pfizer. going out to the FDA. And at the bottom of the memo here, again, this is specifically in regards to the COVID-19 mRNA vaccine, the original submission process, rolling biologics license and application process and all of that. And at the very bottom line, it says a wire transfer for $2,875,842 was made to the U.S. Department of Treasury. Again, that's not the cost of an application for a license for a drug. That's not what it costs. There's more to that number than what meets the eye. And again, I think it's pretty clear that it was a bribe. Again, either the Treasury was bribed, and, well, of course, Pfizer was doing the bribing, but who was the recipient of said bribe? Who's to say? Could be anybody. Treasury Department, FDA, Biden, members of the Biden administration themselves, probably all of the above. They had to fast track it as much as humanly possible. And speaking of that, there's this. And ladies and gentlemen, this is an I told you so. This is Nicholas Holscher talking to Maria Z on her program, Give Him a Listen, regarding blood transfusions among the COVID jabbed in 3, 2, 1.
When you have to go get a blood transfusion, God forbid you get in a major car accident, they may be pumping you up with COVID vaccinated blood, which can result in severe outcomes. And so this has to be stopped. And we have to start cleaning up the blood supply. A very important 2-part study. The first part of this study was we collected all of the cases we could find, the case reports of individuals getting a blood transfusion and then suffering severe reactions. And so we found about 9 unvaccinated individuals. These 9 individuals all suffered either heart damage, extreme blood clotting, multi-organ failure, or death after their blood transfusions. And so that's very worrisome. And then we published a second study looking at the vaccine adverse event reporting system to look for these similar sorts of adverse events occurring. And every single one we looked at, every single adverse event, including hemorrhage, other thrombotic events, Parkinson's, human equivalent of mad cow disease. These are 100 to 1,000 times more frequent with the COVID shots compared to other vaccines. And so every single safety signal was breached there. And so according to these 2 studies, and lastly, we know all of the vaccine components get into the blood. And again, we demonstrated that. You find the spike protein, the vaccine mRNA, the plasmid DNA, all of this garbage is in the blood, and it's in the blood for years after the last shot. And so now what needs to happen, based on this evidence here we collected, we have to start looking directly in the blood supply and looking for the spike protein and mRNA injection genetic material. They have to do it. This is extremely dangerous. And you see this graphic here. These are the safety signals that were dramatically breached in CDC FDA data.
There will be I told you so's. There will be I told you so's. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening as always. Check out the Dangerous Info podcast with Jesse James and Outcast Monday night. They were kind enough to invite me back. Should be a great discussion as always, and 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time in the PM over there on Rumble. With that said, thanks for listening as always. I'll catch you Monday night, and I'll catch you right here on Wednesday. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care, and God bless.